Welcome everyone to the Iconic Conversation series, our November conversation, and this is the last one for the year. I want to start by acknowledging the First Nations people across all of Australia and New Zealand, and from wherever you're joining us from today. I want to acknowledge their enduring connection to country, knowledge and stories, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm in Sydney, and the owners of the land here are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I am Adina Jacobs, and together with my partner, Bobby Marlam, we started Mentor Walk 6 years ago with the intention of bringing quality mentoring experiences to women everywhere to help them build their networks, have inspiring conversations, and to support each other as they work through their challenges, big and small, in their careers. So far, we've run 269 walks in the last 6 years. And in the last 2.5 years, we've expanded to include conversation series, which are free monthly events like this one, led by our mentors and driven by topics that our community is asking us about. It's our partnership with the Iconic that allows us to bring you these monthly free events. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank the Iconic for supporting us and for supporting our community. So thank you again for joining us today. Before we kick off properly, I'll ask that you please make sure that your screen name is your full name. It helps us work out who's here today. And it just helps us understand, who our audience is, and hopefully we can reach out to you afterwards. We've got a survey that we'd like you to fill in at the end, which is very quick, just to make sure that we're on point and that we're talking about things that are of interest to you. So mentees who walk with us say that early in their careers, they're often riddled with imposter syndrome, feelings of underqualification, disorientation, and disillusion. And when you registered for this event, we asked you what you wanted to know about. And I'm confident that our mentors and our mentee, Carol Brown, Tracy Taylor, and Mere Rewi-Leauga, one of our wonderful mentees in New Zealand, will share their experiences with you and address those questions and more today. Carol is a sales director at Microsoft, leading an enterprise team across Australia and New Zealand. She's been at Microsoft for just over 9 years, where she's held a variety of roles across sales, marketing, and leadership. In addition to this, she's a fully certified leadership coach, member of the International Coach Federation, and a proud member of the Forbes Coaches Council. And I'll go on now to introduce very briefly Tracy and Mary as well. And then afterwards, each one of them will take a few minutes to tell you of their stories. Beyond that, then Carol will take us through a development program to help us do a little bit more of a targeted exercise. And then after that, we'll be opening up to a Q&A. So Tracy has been a woman leader in technology for the past 25 years. She's a mentor of ours in Auckland, and she's worked extensively with organizations around the world driving and leading large-scale transformations, both as a client and as a consultant. Her leadership journey is extensive, and she's proud to be a visible and out leader representing both women and the wider LGBTQ+ community. Mere Rewi-Leauga is one of our wonderful mentees in New Zealand. She's an analyst in PwC's technology consulting team. And after a rewarding stint in the travel and tourism industry, her ambitions led her to pursue a career pathway in technology. And today at PwC, she brings together her technical know-how with her people skills to find innovative solutions for both her clients and colleagues. She's a proud ambassador of her Maori and Pacifica heritage, and she actively works towards bridging the gap with rapidly advancing tech world and her community. So that's just a really, really brief view of each of our wonderful women who's joining us here today. They're going to talk a lot more about who they are, what they do, their experience, and share their experiences with you. So we're going to start with Carol, please.
Amazing. Kia ora koutou. I'm really delighted to be here today and share a little bit about my story. And earlier in career and navigating journey is something I'm really passionate about, and something obviously I've been through myself. So I always start with careers can be a bit of a jungle gym. I think mine's a bit of a documentary mini-series, if you like, because it started a little bit differently. So I have a bit of a different start into tech and that a lot of people have. So I actually left school at 16. I was a bit of a rebellious teenager. Started working at Woolies full time on the checkouts and decided, hey, this maybe wasn't going to be it for me forever. From there, I worked in my way into a customer services role at Sunbeam Victor back in the day. And then the Victor Lawnmower rep job came up, and I put my hand up at 19 and said, I'd love this job. I'd be great at this job. And they actually said to me, no way. A, you're 19, and B, we've never actually had a female lawnmower rep, and what do you even know about lawnmowers? So anyway, I persevered, and he literally, amazing man, amazing sales manager that gave me a great opportunity. He threw the keys at me. He's like, you've got 3 months to sink or swim, go for gold. And so I was lucky, I swam, and I was really successful in that role. And that was sort of my first opportunity that took me into sales. And Dean Bullmore was the man, and he took a bit of a chance on me. Fast forward, I did product marketing for quite a while after that. And my opportunity to come into tech was actually with HP. And my manager at the time said to me, come and be a key account exec. And by that time, I was like, no, I'm a marketer, I'm not a seller. And he said, rubbish, come and be a seller. And so I came into HP, and it was a great experience. And I ended up running the consumer business for them. I was there for probably 3 years, and then Samsung came into the market, and I got the opportunity to come across to Samsung. And I thought that was incredible because it was a really different culture to what I was used to. And it taught me really how to navigate different cultures and different people and be empathetic to different cultures. My opportunity to come into Microsoft was when we launched Surface into the New Zealand market. So I got to come in and launch the Surface business for them in New Zealand. And so I did that for a while, went off to have my first child, came back into a different role where I started to learn a little bit more about software in a commercial business. We were talking about different things like public cloud a lot at the time, and I stuck my hand up and said, it's probably time for me to learn a bit more about this. So I went and was an account executive. And then my first leadership role came after a conversation actually with one of our leaders in Asia Pacific. And by this time, I'd got my coaching qualifications, I'd done some women in leadership programs, and I was really passionate about supporting others to reach their full potential and the opportunities that we as leaders can support others to have. And it was a woman called Andrea that said to me, how come you haven't gone for the leadership role? And I said, well, I couldn't do that. I don't have the right experience. Why could I do that? And I made a commitment to ADM at the time and said, okay, I promised to go and have a talk to the country manager and the woman that was doing the role. And that was my promise. That was my commitment. And anyway, I went and spoke to the country manager at the time and said, hey, I'm going to go for, it was the mid-market role. I'm going to go for the mid-market role. And it was cool. I was going to sit on the New Zealand leadership team. And the first thing he said to me was, it's a bit of a stretch, Carol. And so I was like, okay, cool, that's encouraging. And he said, no, go for it. Do your best, go through the process. And then I spoke to the person that had the role, and she's like, oh, I'm really surprised you're going for this role. So anyway, I was successful in that role. And I think the biggest thing I learned by going through that process is we all have amazing things in us. It's how do we translate those skills to others, and how do we articulate transferable skills and show that we may be outside the box, but we are still the right person for the role. So that role really elevated me on to do different other things. I got great opportunities to work on amazing stretch projects and places that I'm really passionate about in regards to coaching and supporting other people. And we're really encouraged at Microsoft to use the business and our roles as a platform to do some really great work that we care about. I know I've only got 6 minutes and I won't keep rambling on actually, but what I will say is the biggest learnings I've had along my career, and as Adina said, I do run an enterprise team across Australia and New Zealand now, is mentors and sponsors. They're really important, and why they've been really important to me personally is they've pushed me outside my comfort zone. And I don't think if it wasn't for incredible people that I've met along the way, I would be where I am today, because sometimes it's those people that push you to see stuff in yourself that you don't actually see in yourself. So I'm going to stop talking so that there's time for everyone else and heaps of questions.
Thank you so much, Carol. I love your story and I'd love to hear more about it. I love the fact that you've come through a non-traditional pathway. I think it's really hard for people to see themselves in that leadership role when they're at the beginning of their careers. And hearing your story allows people to envision themselves in a position like that as well, and to know that it's not only one way of getting somewhere. So thank you for sharing that with us. Tracy, let's hear about you.
Well, I think like Carol, maybe there's a common theme here in terms of rebellion. So I was 15 when I left school, almost 16. And I thought I knew everything and realized pretty quickly I didn't know very much. So I started my career as a civil servant. I was the youngest civil servant in the UK back in the early 90s. And I was very lucky, actually, that they sponsored me to continue my education so I could actually study as well as working. And I think the first thing that really struck me was, I had a very formidable female leader right from the outset, and she was really, really tough on me, but actually she gave me the support as well as the mentorship to actually push myself further. Moved to London when I was 18, and that was a huge learning curve in terms of, growing up in the north of England where Harry Potter was filmed, is where I grew up, actually. So a little small village, man and daughter, major imposter syndrome, go to London and there's definitely a north-south divide. And that's really where I kind of started my journey, I suppose, in terms of doing more and learning more. A little bit like Carol, I had a very non-traditional pathway into technology. So I was interested in technology, but it was, I'm a little bit older than Carol, just a bit. I think we worked that out, Carol. I was interested in everything sort of technology, and it was some really, really basic stuff back then. But I was more and more interested, and I got more and more opportunity with the job that I was doing. I switched from central government to Westminster Council and into my first leadership role. So I ran their housing benefit division at 22, and that was a huge job. And I had imposter syndrome like you wouldn't believe. And I was facing the public in a pretty stressful environment. And I really did seek mentors and supporters through that process to hold me up on what was a really difficult role, etc. And in that time period, I worked out, I needed to think about some study and put some time into my education and do something different. And then signed up and actually did a 4-year degree in about 18 months with some evening study and then some full-time work, and decided to do business information systems and French because I thought it would make me way more sophisticated than I am. And that was my first mistake, because learning French and doing degree French is very, very different from ordering a baguette when you're at school. So I worked really hard on the French aspect, and that was probably the hardest part of my degree. When I came out of university, I went straight into a technology role leading a project, which was a proportion of NatWest Online Bank, which was a big program of work. And really, that's kind of where I started, I guess, my professional career. I think at every step of the process, though, there's been imposter syndrome and not feeling like I fit. And that's a little bit to do with who I am and kind of my own beliefs, but it's a little bit about trying to forge a way where there are not many women, and there certainly were not that many women, and still not, actually, as I progressed. So I worked out pretty quickly that I needed to pick the battles to fight and actually try and get a seat at the table and look at what that seat at the table looked like to empower others and start to become a role model, even though I was uncomfortable with that title, and try and mentor and do all those sorts of things. Fast forward a few years, I worked in Europe, I lived in India, I set up a captive organization for Fidelity Investments in India, which was a major opportunity, but also a real challenge for me, and a time which was quite difficult personally, because I did definitely go back in the closet and definitely hide my true identity. Again, imposter syndrome and wanting to fit in. But I learned through that process, spent some time working in Europe, came to Asia Pacific, and then went back to the UK, and then my wife, we've known each other for a really long time, but that's a different story. We came out to Australia in 2011, and we were very, very lucky to welcome our children while we lived in Australia. So I'm a mum of 3, Harrison, Caitlin and Harper, twins, and a almost 6-year-old. So life is pretty busy. I then went to the US, where I led Accenture's West Region Technology Division, and then I came back to New Zealand around 3.5 years ago, and I'm now at PwC and a senior partner. And as much as my career has progressed, I think, my messaging really is at every step of that process, I've sought mentors, role models, and people who've supported me. I have a strong voice at the table, but at every step of the process, I face that imposter syndrome and that doubt. And I'm really lucky that I've been able to use the seat at the table to actually drive good. And Mere and the team and the Ignite program at PwC has been a real career highlight of mine, in terms of, I think once you have a seat at the table, to give back and to do good is a really important message, and to seek others that want to do the same. So even if it's a little bit of volunteering or a little bit of work, to help out someone else. Think about the role that you can play in enabling others and enabling women in the roles that you're in, and give things a go. And my key message would be, no one really has a traditional pathway. No one really minds where you went to university. No one ever asks me whether I have a degree. Once you get past a certain age, what they're interested in is that I'm authentic, that I'm true to my word, and I deliver on what I'm going to do. And I think it's really important that that authentic self is present with everything that you do. So with that in mind, I will stop there and I will hand back over, Adina.
Thank you so much, Tracy. I love that as well. I love hearing everybody's stories. And what I find personally is the more people you speak to, the more versions there are of different ways of getting to things, different people you can speak to, different pathways, different everything. So what I love both from you, Carol and Tracy, is how you've given us some, in that brief period of time, some really practical things that you can do that have really made a difference in your career. So I'm hoping that the people who are with us today have taken some notes. And just starting by coming to mentor walks is a big deal. It's a low commitment, makes a big impact. It introduces you to new people, new ideas, new thought processes. And I'm going to ask Mary now to give us some stories of where she's come from. She's earlier in her career than Carol and Tracy are. She's one of our mentees at Mentor Walks in New Zealand, and she's had an incredible career so far for the short period of time that she's had. And so she's going to talk to us a bit about that.
Thanks, Adina. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Miri, and I work at PwC in our consulting team. Similar to Tracy and Carol, my journey into the industry has been quite different, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. So most of my experience is in the travel and tourism industry and hospitality. When I left high school, it was a dream of mine to become a flight attendant. So I worked my way up in hospo jobs, cafes, bars, hotels, and I even did an internship with Walt Disney World for 6 months. In 2017, I started flying, and I flew for 3.5 years, which was incredible. I got to meet lots of new people, travel to different countries, and I ate more cookie time biscuits than the average human should. But fast forward to 2020, and COVID hit me like a slap in the face. My airline shut down all the New Zealand bases, and the dream I was living came to an end. Having believed I'd found my set career path, I wasn't too sure where to go from here. And after a week of stressing, I mustered up the courage to update my CV. When I was going through this process, I kind of noticed that most of my skills were soft skills. And I was disappointed to find only 2 listings in hospo on Seek, but I did notice there were over 1,000 jobs in tech. The main thought that kept running through my head at the time was, how would I look after my family if a pandemic struck again? And, this had happened to me and I was still flying. In my culture, it's customary to look after your family, and I couldn't really shake that thought off. So then and there, I decided to go back to school. At the time, my brother was finishing up 3 years of computer engineering, and he mentioned it might be something that I enjoy because I already enjoy problem solving, but it's a focus on the more technical side of things. So yeah, after a bit of research, I applied for the course only 2 weeks after losing my job. Excuse me. My culture and heritage is very important to me. So while I was at uni, I tried to incorporate it into my studies. We created apps one semester, and I used the opportunity to create a multi-language app for kids. This is where my passion for tech really started to grow, when I saw the benefits and opportunities it could bring for my family and friends. And I came to the realization that I may have found a new dream job and lifelong career, one where I could see my family and friends learning Te Reo Māori on an application that I created. Towards the end of my studies, my name was put forward for an apprenticeship in technology at PwC. A couple of weeks after my big interview, I remember the guy called me and he's like, "Congratulations, you got the job." And I couldn't believe it. I actually called him back and confirmed the spelling of my name was correct, because I didn't think it was like it was real. It was crazy. And I never thought of that as like a imposter syndrome thing, but looking back, it definitely was. if you guys are similar to me, you'll understand why I did that. You know, when these great opportunities come, we question ourselves and our abilities, and we really shouldn't, because we sacrifice a lot and we do a lot to be in this position to chase those opportunities. So it's been a year since I've joined PwC, and the opportunities to grow in my career have opened up left, right, and center for me. I started out working in a more technical team, but have recently moved into our whole team, and I'm now working in the digital health space. Giving back to my community has always been really important to me, and this kind of work really aligns with my values and purpose. So I guess the takeaway from that is that dreams can change. When I left high school, it was a dream of mine to fly for the national carrier. When I applied to study, I thought I wanted to be in a very technical role, like back-end systems or engineering roles. But here I am, a year and a half later, supporting Māori and Pacific communities involved with their technology in our Horder team, and I couldn't be happier. Now I quickly want to touch on the biggest lesson I've learned since changing industries. I say this all the time, and it's your past and experiences shouldn't be a barrier for you to look into different career paths. I have recently come to the realization that my background and experiences are actually my superpower, and it's what differentiates me from everyone else in the room, especially coming into tech from a completely different industry. It was pretty intimidating, but the soft skills I acquired while flying, like teamwork, communication skills, interpersonal skills, are just as important in this field as the technical ones. So yeah, that's me. Here we are 2 years later. I've done a complete 180 spin, but the only difference is instead of giving out the cookie times, I'm eating them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that. And I love the way that you looked at what was out there, realized that what you thought your skill sets were didn't match what the jobs were. And so you reframed the way that you see things, the way that you could apply what you're doing or what you had to what's out there. And interesting that you said that, because there are so many jobs out there in tech, and we did a conversation series earlier this year about exactly that. It was about how you can have a career in tech when you're not traditionally a tech person or somebody who's done engineering or knows a lot about computers, and how you can get in different ways. So if anyone is interested in that, that's up on our YouTube page from a previous conversation series. Thank you so much, Mere, and thank you so much, Carol and Tracy. What we're going to do now is Carol's going to take us through her career development plan. And then after that, we're going to open up the chat. We do have a lot of questions that you'd submitted beforehand. And if there's anything that either hasn't been covered or anything that you'd like to ask as we go through the conversation here, please do. We'll do our best to address whatever we can. I already fear that we may not get to everything, but we will do whatever we can. So thank you for being involved. And Carol, I'll pass back over to you now.
Awesome, thank you. I'll be super quick because we'll send this out and we'll send the details, but what we're doing is a bit of a takeaway from here is I think there's nothing more important to help the thought process than actually putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard if you prefer, around what do you want to think about. So some of the things we think about is when you're looking to move, what's your potential next role even? What do you achieve? What do you want to achieve? What's your aspirations? And don't panic if you don't know that particular role, because at my age, I still don't know exactly what I want to do for the next 10 years. It's like, it's all about the journey. Who's your internal sponsor? We talk a lot about sponsors and mentors, and we've all talked about the amazing sponsors and mentors. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is, because the mentors are going to support you. Who's your people? Who's your person you can just ring up and ask anything and feel safe and trusted? And I think that's the power of mentor walks as well. But who are your sponsors? Who are the people that are talking about you and thinking about opportunities for you when you're not in the room? What are your experience? What are your strengths? What are your development areas? What's the stuff that you need to learn and you want to lean into? How do you get your leaders to support you with that as well? And then what do you want to learn on the job? What do you want to learn from others? And then what do you want to learn through study or classrooms or different programs? And then the most important part is, how do we take all this stuff? How do you share this with your leaders? How do you use this as a bit of a thought process, a conversation starter? But most importantly, How do you get your leaders to help support you to be accountable for this, to be accountable for your progress, so you get to check in? So we'll send you a basic template that you can start to use, and you can start to think about it. But it's really important, even if we come up over Christmas and we actually get the time to shut off, to think about, what do I want to do for the next few years? What impact do I want to have on the business I'm in? What impact do I want to have for my family? What impact do I want to have on my community? So it's a great just starting point for you all that we'll share with you all after this call. Pass back to you, Adina.
Thank you so much, Carol. And it's true, we've heard this over and over again through a lot of our conversation series. You have to put in the work, and templates like yours make a huge difference, because sometimes we just don't know where to start, but you have to actually carve out the time, put it in your diary, and make sure that you spend the time on yourself and on your career. And the truth is, it's an employees market at the moment. There are so many incredible roles out there. It's so hard to find good people. And if you can define what it is that's important to you, to your community, to you personally and your family, and what you want to be doing and what you want to spend the next few years doing, tools like the one that Carol's sharing with us are really going to help you figure out what your next steps are. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that you're sharing that with our community. So opening it up to our people on here today, if you want to drop your questions in the chat, please feel free to. We'll start going through them. I'm going to ask one that came up many times in the pre-questions that we asked people to send in, and it's around something that keeps coming up over and over again for our mentees and also for our mentors, and that is imposter syndrome. Tracy and Carol both mentioned it. Mere, I feel like you just have the confidence and the tenacity to push through it. You may feel it, but I feel like you can teach a lot of people here how to just face it and manage it and deal with it. So I'm going to ask whichever one of the three of you would like to talk about it first, please give us some practical tips about how you have identified that you have imposter syndrome and a couple of things that you can do to combat it.
I don't mind going first.
Thank you.
Look, I think first thing is know that everyone has it. They may not call it that, but everybody feels it. And it's not just a female thing, even though I think females identify it faster than males. And it happens at every level of everyone's career. So I was listening to our CEO recently, and he talked about it in terms of when he took the CEO role. And he never comes across as someone, for example, that would have that. So it was quite interesting hearing what that looked like for him. I think own the uncomfortableness in what that means. I think if you try and get distracted from it and don't kind of recognize what it is, or almost try and not accept it, then I think that's when the challenge comes in. So it is perfectly normal to feel uncomfortable when you meet people for the first time. It's perfectly normal to question, why is your voice important in a room full of people that you've not met before, or people that you know who are maybe more senior than you or less senior or have different backgrounds. But I think, own your place. You are there for a reason. You have been invited to that conversation, whether it's in person or virtual, for a reason. So try and ground yourself to that. And what I do, and it's a kind of interesting thing, is I create a physical connection to where I am. So when I'm going into a conversation where I worry, and I do still worry a lot as a senior partner, I still worry. I go into conversations with clients and other individuals, and I think about how I want to show up and what I look like and how I'm going to be, etc. So I put my feet on the ground. I'm quite short, so I have to lower the chair quite often, but I create a physical connection, and I allow my brain to accept the feelings that it has. But I also acknowledge that now is not the time to react to that. The time is to react to that later, and I'll process that later. But I'm going to be the best I can be in that conversation, and I'm going to lean in and I'm going to listen, actively listen, not just listen for an opportunity to talk. But I'm also going to actually be present and be contributing my words and my time, because that's important, and try and address it that way, and then deal with the nerves later, which can often happen after the event.
Amazing. Thank you, Tracy. How about you, Carol?
Yeah, I probably echo what Tracy says. I still get it all the time. I remember the first time I sat around a boardroom table at Microsoft and was like, whoa, how did I end up at this table with all these people? They're from Microsoft. And so I've had, I think it's the be uncomfortable, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you do push through it and it doesn't go away. Every time you take a new role, every time you take on a new challenge, you do get that oh, can I do this moment? And I still get it. Like, I feel quite uncomfortable now because I'm quite off script for me at the moment. So I get a little bit now, and I've had conversations where with safe people where I'm like, can I even do this job? Like, is this even my jam? And so it's quite normal. So I totally think it is about being comfortable with being uncomfortable, because I think that's where you get your best growth and your best learnings as well. I'm actually going to try Tracy's tricks for next time.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea as well. What about you, Meadow? Like I said, I feel like imposter syndrome is potentially not something that you experience, but I'd love to hear about your experiences and how you manage it if it comes up for you.
Oh, thank you. That's crazy because I feel like I've had imposter syndrome since I entered the industry. And
it's amazing to me because you seem like you've got the confidence in a great way to pivot, to change, to take on new things. And it feels like you are already uncomfortable with that idea of being uncomfortable and you embrace it.
Yeah, that's probably true. I have had a lot of conversations with Carol about imposter syndrome. So I'm really lucky that I have someone to talk through it. But yes, it's definitely being comfortable with the uncomfortable. I do feel like now I'm in a completely different industry. It's quite hard to navigate. But it's also one thing I've noticed for me is that doing the 1% outside of work to make sure that I'm on top of things and I can actually hold conversations with these people, you know, and I'm not kind of unsure about what's going on, helps me a lot as well.
Totally. I do that as well. I find sometimes I feel like I'm completely out of my depth. Like I'm not, you know, I'm more of a creative person and a bit more strategic, and I'm really not financial, but I know enough to have a conversation and I know when to ask the right questions. And so what I've discovered is I don't have to be great at everything. There are lots of people around me who are good at things that I'm not good at, and I'm really good at things that they're not good at. So if I, exactly what you said, Meadow, like do the research beforehand so that you can walk into the conversation and ask the questions. And I find that that's been really helpful to me.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. So one that's come up quite a bit for us as well is that question around how to tackle minimum experience when you're applying for a new role or stepping into a new industry. And I feel like all three of you will be able to talk to that. Meadow, let's start with you this time. Like when you had no experience, how did you turn up for that first conversation?
Okay. My first conversation was probably my assessment center, and I really felt out of place there. You know, I was with a lot of incredibly smart people. I was still studying at the time. I only did a diploma and I was finishing up. But I think because I know my purpose, and my purpose is my family, that kind of like just grounds me and brings me in. And it's like, you can do this. Like believing in yourself and knowing why you're doing it is very important. And I still hold that to this day. Like, you know, we still get the wobbles. It's completely normal. But
Yeah.
Going back to your why is probably what keeps me pushing through.
And I know from a cultural perspective, like your family is key and you've grown up with that and that's what you've always known. For people who have a hard time understanding what their why is there anything that you can like help people to identify that?
Yeah, I was actually similar. So while I was flying, I was able to, you know, experience all of these other cultures. I was never home. I never saw my family. And when I did come back, something inside of me was like, let's go and talk to my grandparents. I haven't spoken to them in ages. Like, where did you come from? And then when I started hearing stories about my whakapapa, where they come from, stories about my ancestors, I was like, actually, like that's me. And yeah, I guess you got to go out there and talk to people, have conversations, think about what's most important to you. That's kind of how it happened for me, but it's quite hard. It's not like a
you've got to put the time in. It's the same as everything. You need to carve that time out and make sure that you spend it on yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Adina, can I comment on the, so I had the pleasure of being the assessor on one of the assessment centres. So the program that I created is the program that Mayor's talking about. And what was really interesting, and I'm not going to try and embarrass you in this process, is that we were looking for people that were able to really own their why and tell their story. And Mere, along with others on the day, were absolutely outstanding. This wasn't about finding people who had years of experience in tech and turned up with degrees, etc., because it was the first non-degree program that PwC has done. But it was about wanting to hear the story and hear that connection and that passion and that authentic voice. And Mere, you were never, ever not going to get the role. It was always a given. It was a fantastic opportunity and experience to hear your story. And that inspiration from pivoting careers was also a really big part of that, what made you you. And it was compelling to own your journey in that conversation. And I think that's probably the thing I would say is your journey is your journey. It is your story. It is yours to tell. And so being able to tell that in an authentic way and connect that with the present is really important. And I think doing that and doing that well is a really outstanding way to start.
That's so true. And I think a lot of people, and especially women who are early in their careers, feel like, how can they support someone else? How can they do something that's going to have an impact on somebody else? And the beauty of the way we run things at Mentor Walks is it's one mentor, 3 mentees. And the idea behind that is it's not the mentor telling the mentees what to do. It gives the mentees the opportunity to share their experiences and understand the value that they have when they couldn't identify it in themselves. They've had experiences that support other women. And I think that talks a lot to what you're saying, Tracy, about how, you know, your own story is so important, and being able to tell that and being able to represent who you are to people is so much more important than the degree, the education, the years of experience. It's, you know, there's a place for all of that as well, but your own story is worth so much more than you think it is. Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit, Tracy, about how a couple of times that you've tackled a new space or a new role with no experience and how you sort of fake it till you make it?
Yeah, look, I think experience is interesting, right? Because when you, and often this is a female thing as well, when we apply for jobs, we probably think we can do 80% or more than the job is asking for. So, you know, when I was in the US and I was being asked to consider PwC, I remember thinking, you know, PwC, you know, I'm working for Accenture, I'm doing really well over here. Why would I want to become a partner? I'm not a partner. I'm a working class girl who's done good. Why would they want me? And what does that mean, etc. And I think it's about like a little bit like an onion. You're sort of peeling back what are your challenges and what are your concerns, and peeling back who you want to be and how you want to show up, and knowing that actually most interviews are just conversations. They're just getting to know you. And when you lean in with your experience and who you are as a person, if that creates a connection, and great, because that creates the next connection, that creates the next connection. And even though I don't come from a middle class or a partner background, and I certainly remember when I joined, sort of sit in the room, you know, being one of the only women, and it's quite pale male and quite professional and senior and all these stuffy guys that have kind of gone through a process, etc. You know, I'm sat there thinking, why me? Why am I here? And then as soon as I was able to talk and be who I was, I realized really quickly that I had the right to sit at that table. So I think it is just, it's back in yourself, it's back in your story. I think it is, you know, fake it till you make it's an interesting term, because I think actually we probably don't as women. We don't fake it. We can do most of it. But I can tell you our male colleagues often fake it till they make it, and don't often make it. So I think it is about just trying to distinguish that. And then I think it is your right to speak and your right to be and your right to have that seat. And that's all the way through your career. So that right, you earn that through your story, your experience. And so know when you're there, that is the right that you have. And so I think it is just sort of reframing what that looks like, etc. And working through the nerves some other way, right? And look, I think the same in terms of something like this, right? I mean, you know, I remember thinking, why on earth do you want to talk to me? I still feel that way. I still feel that way all the time. So it's just acknowledging it, and it's acknowledging that you have something to say that may be of value to others, regardless of where you are in your career, right at the start, all the way till the end, and somewhere in the middle, right?
Thank you. Thank you. That's amazing. Tess has asked a question on the chat. She wants to know, how do you know when it's the right time to switch careers or roles when you're early on in your career? I know the traditional model of like going to university, getting a job and staying somewhere for 30 years is less common than a lot of moving around these days. And so how do you know when you start out that it's the right time to move? That is open to any one of the three of you.
I might kick off with this one.
Sure.
I think the conversation that we've had up to this point is really important when you're making those decisions. So Mitty and Tracy talk about their values and what's important to them and what's the impact that you want to have. And so I think as I've kind of navigated my career, I used to go every 2 or 3 years, I'll have a change and I might climb up the ladder a little bit. But now it's really about what can I learn from that role and what impact can I have? And so when Tracy talks as well about getting a seat at the table, I think like for every role, I now look at it like, well, the seat at the table allows me to have an impact in the way that I want and work with amazing people like Tracy and work with other incredible people across New Zealand and Australia that really care about making a difference. And so that's kind of my thought process now. And it's taken me till now to go, okay, well, what does this mean for me? What can I learn? What's the impact that I can have? What's the impact I can have for my family as well as I do this? Because family values are big. I want to be around for my boys. And so I think there is never any right time. I think it is about the opportunity and it's about not saying yes to everything. I've learned that along the way as well, to be really considerate about what will you learn and what's the impact that I can have by doing this. And that's really my thought process now as well. And I know lots of people from different parts of the industry, but I think that's really important as well. Is it's not necessarily about taking the job and saying yes, but who are the incredible people that you surround yourself with and how are you building your network for the future as well?
Yeah, I mean, and that really does come back to what you've all been saying, which is about do the work on yourself to understand what's important to you so that you can have those conversations and make those decisions. Janet's asking, what's the best advice you can give to someone who's in their 20s trying to navigate through office politics?
Accept that politics will always be there, but you've got to work out whether or not you want to be part of the politics or you want to rise above it. And that might mean that feeling in your stomach is telling you that you need to go and do something different.
Yeah.
That would be my view.
Follow your intuition.
Yeah. Your gut feel is normally the right reaction.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's hard sometimes when you like to really understand and be able to read that feel in your early days because you don't have a lot of experience to see how that's actually going to come back. So Tina is asking, when you know you want to move, but you're confused, what advice do you have to help people make those decisions? Who wants to take that
I'm
one?
looking at Mitty. I might kick off and I can see Mitty wants to go as well, but do the work. When you get the dev plan, do the work, sit down, go through the thought process, write out your strengths, write out the things that you love, write out the things that suck your will a little bit, like just do that pre-work and you'll know that'll support.
Yeah. Meta, how do you feel about that? You got it?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Now we can hear you.
Sorry, I actually didn't hear the question.
The question was, when you know you want to move roles, but you're confused, what's your advice on where to start?
I usually start with like thinking about if it's the kind of work that I want to be involved in. So it's similar to Carol. So I switched roles from technology consulting to the health and wellbeing team because I wanted to work with Māori and Pacific communities. And I also wanted to grow in the digital health space because New Zealand's going through new health reforms and I knew it would be a really interesting piece of work for me to get across. And it made sense to me because it aligned with my values.
Amazing. Thank you. We are surprisingly at time because I could ask a lot more questions. So I'm going to thank the three of you so much, Carol, Tracy and Meta, for spending time with us this afternoon, for sharing your stories. And what's most important here is understanding that there's not one way to get something done. There's not one way to get somewhere, that it's always important to really understand yourself and to do the work on yourself to know how you can step forward and how to trust yourself. We will be sending out a survey, as I said earlier. We'll also be sending out Carol's development plan. So please make the time, if you can, even in the next few days and leading up to the end of the year, to spend that time and do it. One thing we always do when we have people come to us at Mentor Walks is we ask you to do one thing for another woman after you have a Mentor Walks experience. Just one thing, big or small. It could be something as small as, you know, you saw someone you thought they looked a bit under the weather, so checking in on them to see if they're okay. And it could be something as big as, if you see a real injustice, call it out when you don't think anybody else is going to. Be the one to step up and call it out. But whether it's big or small, please do something for another woman in the next few days after your experience here. Our upcoming events are Adelaide this Thursday, Sydney's this Friday, Wollongong, Christchurch and Melbourne are next week. We've got Singapore on the 6th of December, and we've got a virtual event on the 7th of December, which is a Mentor Walks event. It's very similar to our walking events, where you ask a question, you're put in a group with one mentor and 3 mentees, and you get to go for, well, you don't walk together, but you get to sit together for 50 minutes and discuss each other's challenges. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. And thank you to our wonderful people, Carol, Tracy and Mere, for being with us tonight. And have a wonderful and safe rest of your year, and a good evening, everyone. Bye.